We want to welcome Mary Gwen Wheeler, who is the Executive Director of 55,000 Degrees. Let's give her a big round of applause.
There we go. So in choosing my song, I wanted to make sure we had a female band, so that's Dixie Chicks, and also wide open spaces. As you've heard, we have room to grow, and we need to have that expansive vision. So my role up here today is to really talk about the education part of this story. And, it's not like we haven't had big aspirations. So it's also to say that having big aspirations, setting a very ambitious goal, is a necessary but not sufficient ingredient. So this community, back in 2010, which is based on, actually, let me start even further back. One of the reasons that we can compare ourselves to other cities is because Greater Louisville Project has been doing this since 2003. And we know where we rank. And we knew that we had to do something about this. And in 2010, business, government, education, faith community, community services came together. The leaders of those groups said, let's hold ourselves accountable, set a goal, a 10-year goal, and I guess I get to do this, to move up in that ranking. And what would it take to do that? At 50% of our population would move us up into that top tier. And that's where 55,000 Degrees was born. It was based in this recognition that increasingly education was required. Education beyond high school is required to earn that living wage in a knowledge economy. And that's linked to this idea that skilled, boy, I didn't even touch that, and it went, that skilled talent and education is key to that economic competitiveness that we've been talking about. So we immediately got busy. And we aligned around shared metrics, around shared data, and that was helping us to catalyze action. It was building a more college-going culture. We even had it with the mayor's encouragement, everybody taking on individual pledges, a Count Me In campaign. And we saw progress. But what we quickly saw, didn't take long, was that we weren't going at the pace we needed. And today, when you see the trajectory, 8 years later, we're only going to hit a little less than 46%, not that 50%. And meanwhile, others have still been moving at a much higher rate. So what did that mean? Well, rather than, even as we were beginning to say this year after year in our annual report, that, gee, we're not on target, we have to accelerate, we didn't back off. We didn't say, let's change the goal. We started to go deeper. Mayor challenged us in about 2014 to start thinking earlier. You know, if kids come to kindergarten a couple years behind, they're going to start to fall further behind, and it's going to be hard to catch up. We've got to start much earlier, and we also have to look at the other end much more deeply about what are those connections to workforce, what are those jobs and careers. So a cradle-to-career framework was started where Metro United Way stepped up to be the pillar for early childhood, and Kentuckiana Works started doing Code Louisville and these great things that happen. Kent also started with the Greater Louisville, with GLI, saying we have to be very clear about how we're attracting talent too. Our pipeline is not only enough. We've got to be the place where those millennials want to come, where people want to move with their families, where there are jobs, and where it is a cool place to live. The connections to workforce that you heard, the career calculator, making sure that people had the information about what, if you wanted a certain wage, well, what kind of jobs pay that, and then what kind of education is needed for that. Or if you think you are interested in a certain thing, be clear about how much you're going to make from that, and don't get into debt if you're not going to be able to pay it off. We also focus very much on adult returners. There are people that had stopped out or hadn't had a chance to finish that education. And we now have a group called Degrees Work. Again, Kentuckiana Works is hosting this. I think Joy McAtee, the director of that, is in the room. We help employers who want to reinvest, who want to maximize that tuition reimbursement so that they're actually getting the benefit of re-engaging and engaging their employers and employees and helping them with continuous learning. So Degrees Work helps to coach people about how do you get back into college, how do you finish that degree. And we continue to see those equity gaps, and understood that these are barriers that we must break down. And it requires a more targeted strategy. If you want these universal outcomes to be better, you've got to target. By 2016, though, the trends were still telling us that too many people were being left out of that education prize, and that aligning action wasn't accelerating those system outcomes. Let me just show you some of the trends we were looking at since 2008. Michael's already mentioned one of them. State spending down 8%, down 33% since 2003. And Kentucky is one of the only a handful of states that has not started reinvesting in public education since the recovery, because in 2008 a lot of people stopped investing, but they've been reinvesting. At the same time, as you might imagine, tuition is up 50%. At four-year publics in the state, that's more at U of L, and 33% at our two-year publics. Local enrollment, then, in undergraduate education. Since 2008, it's down 8%, but it's down 21% since our high in 2010. We're also seeing college going. That's the number of high school graduates that go on to college in that following year. 8 percentage points down since 2008. And finally, local degree completions. This is from our local area colleges and universities. The number of people completing degrees in a year had gone up. But since 2012, it has started to decline again. So these are the trends that led us to think, well, how do we scale? How do we spread this hope and aspiration that we have for our community? How do we actually reach out to students and families and bring them into the system? What are those system barriers? And a couple of things were clear. One, we needed to be more than just grass tops. We needed to have a much more inclusive process and table and engaging. Students were telling us, nothing about us without us. How do we get that student voice in? How do we ask the people who we're trying to change the circumstances for, what is it that you need? And what are those supports and barriers? This has led us to a new partnership that the mayor mentioned, the Cradle to Career, and we're starting to call the Louisville Promise. That name, too, may change. But this initiative is going to work on 3 levels. One, to ensure that every student, not just those who have advantages, get the supports and opportunities they need at every stage along that developmental pathway to post-secondary success to be able to achieve their dreams. Second, we must remove cost as a barrier. We decided we're not going to wait for the state. We've got to advocate, we've got some opportunities, we've got to keep, but we cannot wait because these other cities are moving. There are some 250 communities in this country that have some kind of College Promise program. So we are going to try to raise the funds to say every student that graduates from JCPS will get at least a 2-year community college free. That will be an opportunity to them. We also understand that this is not just about aligning. We've got to have a much stronger collaborative structure that is not just saying, okay, what are you and you and you doing? We're going to plan together. We're going to look at that student level data. We're going to make sure that then we are aligning resources and doing the projects together. They're going to remove those system barriers of poverty and institutional racism. But even with Louisville Promise, that doesn't mean that we can back off this goal. So 55,000 Degrees is going to continue to have this call to action. We must focus on adults as well. There are some 90,000 adults in this community that have some college but no degree, and there are another 140,000 that have only a high school degree or less. We also have to, and this is where we're getting at this role clarity, we also have to make sure that local colleges and universities are graduating more people. We should be producing at least 10,000 graduates a year. And we also are going to continue to call for greater equity and outcomes, because what you see on this graph can no longer be acceptable. That is a 20% gap between African American and whites in college attainment in our community. So, what's the call to action? And again, more of this role of clarity. If we want this more skilled, more educated, more innovative, more inclusive workforce that provides opportunity to all, we have to own that. If you're a business, claim the workforce problem. It's your problem. Upskill your incumbent workers by partnering with Degrees Work. Invest in your bench through internships and co-ops and being a partner in academies for Louisville. Higher ed. Adapt to today's working students. You saw how Neely is trying to lead that charge, and she wants us to call her Neely. So align education and majors with real-life opportunities. Support and retain those underrepresented students and help more of your students graduate. I want to point to that the state is also here. This is the Kentucky Chamber-led a Business Education Roundtable. The title is Striving to be Top Tier for Talent, also wanting to move up. Bottom line, average is not good enough. They are saying along the same things, and I've got some more of these reports if you want them. So invest. Invest means a lot of things. One, we're going to be asking you to invest in the Louisville Promise Scholarship. But invest in your tuition reimbursement if you're an employer. Invest by removing barriers like providing childcare or transportation. Or invest by paying higher family supporting wages. Participate. Advocacy is one of the most important ways to do that. But also, get on a board. Be involved in the community agencies that are making a difference. Tutor, mentor, coach. Those are the things, the ways. Own, invest, and participate. We're going to continue to hit that call to action throughout this challenge today, because if we don't step up, we are going to look back in 8 years and see that we're right here where we started, in the bottom half of the pack of our competitor cities, now 5 behind Nashville. Thank you.